All right, good morning, guys. We're right at 9 o'clock, so we will go ahead and get started. Um, I'm not going to share my camera today because it is Pajama Saturday. I have no intention of getting dressed in normal people clothes. Um, and I also have my 3-year-old and my 6-year-old running around here, as well as my dogs. So if you hear any of that background noise, I apologize. I've ordered all of them to be quiet, but we'll see how that holds up. All right. Can everybody hear me okay? Also not using my headset, so the sound might not be quite as good as it is when it's in my office. Yes. All right. Perfect. Thanks, Margie. All right. So I'm recording this. I will put this on the class board to get so everybody else can see it. And if you want to refer back to it, this is your second Collaborate session. You will see your grade enter in on Blackboard. Probably in the next week, you'll get your full points for attending. So, okay, looking back, let's talk about Irving. You read Rip Van Winkle in week 5. So I hope with Irving, you got a little bit of sense of this writing style that was really meant to reflect the time period. The interesting thing about Rip Van Winkle that I want you to kind of keep in mind is that it is a kid's story, and its intent was to entertain children. So we're shifting our, moving to this Renaissance period where, the whole idea of Renaissance is rebirth, renewal, very different from where we had been overall. Renaissance is not just a writing period, it is a cultural change, or art period throughout the world. And so we see Irving doing, something very different, which is writing for children and also with the intent to entertain and have that kind of double fold meaning, right? So Rip Van Winkle himself is a man who is very much symbolic of someone who never lived up to their potential, right? He, is very kind to people. Everybody really likes him. His problems in life are at home with his wife, but he's incredibly lazy and doesn't want to work and so forth. So we have this kind of thematic build of a character who symbolizes the American that has not become what he should be. So I won't go too much on Irving, but I hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, it's a shift from what we were reading. You had Franklin before him, and so you were reading very historical text, and now we've kind of moved into this period of entertaining while still trying to reflect on the history of the time period. All right, so this week you've read, or you might be reading this weekend, Poe, The Telltale Heart and the Fall of House of Usher. Poe is one of my favorite authors. The one problem I have with Poe is that he is overanalyzed and overtaught, and so he becomes this kind of more of this modern symbol of literature and less regarded for the seriousness of his writing and who he was. But I'm sure many of you probably have a foundation in Poe from your middle school or high school literature. He was an individual who was incredibly plagued by his world of who he was, his psychological problems or mental issues, and I think the main one was probably depression and paranoia. He had real problems with alcohol and drug abuse, and so he was just kind of jumble of a person, and we often see a lot of who he is reflected in his writing. And so so you will see a lot of critics comment on that. That he was, plagued with these problems – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – he's, typically think of Poe. That is kind of the father of American Gothic writing, if you will. Now, not every critic is going to believe in that, but I think as modern and cultural kind of phenomenon and popularity, Poe's going to snag that role. So hopefully you saw in The Telltale Heart and The Fall of the House of Usher several similarities throughout these stories. The Telltale Heart, well, let me back up. American Gothic is rooted in this idea of psychological paranoia. So often we think of horror and Gothic writing, we might mistakenly think, okay, this has to do with slasher type things, clowns, people hiding in the closet, and so forth. But no, that's not at all true. In the American Gothic, the number one kind of fear that's embedded in it is this whole idea of psychological decay, and you see that very clearly in Poe's writing. So The Telltale Heart, a couple of things I want to point out. And Telltale Heart and The Fall of House Usher are two of my favorite stories, so I'm really going to try to be concise and not ramble too much. But in The Telltale Heart, this is a very brief story, and in it we have a narrator who's considered to be an unreliable narrator. Research the story, you're going to see a lot of different interpretations as to what who the narrator is, what's wrong with them, what's going on. Some people think this is a jail cell interview. Other people think that he's talking to a jail to another person in jail. There's just all the speculation of who he's talking to, and then some people think that he is writing this directly talking to you, the reader. And that's one of the really interesting and kind of eerie parts of the story, is that if you think back on it, Poe is really addressing the reader the narrator is addressing the reader very personally, right? And at the very beginning, he pulls the reader in by saying things like, "You're never going to believe what I tell you. Come, let me tell you this story. Listen very carefully." And so, whether Poe's intent is for you to perceive this as him speaking to someone who's interviewing him, or him speaking directly to the reader, regardless, we have the same kind of overall feeling of okay, baby, go in the other room. That's good. Wash your hands. Go. We have this overall feeling of being addressed personally, and that makes the story all the more eerie, right? And one of the things he says throughout the beginning is, he says you're not going to believe how well that he did this crime. He did it so well that he couldn't possibly be crazy. Right? Liam, go. Sorry, I have a very wild 3-year-old. And his whole explanation is that he planned this, thought about it, and concealed it so well that there's no way that he could be mad, right? That because he's so good at it, a crazy person could not have done that. And so it's very interesting. The other thing that Poe uses in both stories, The Fall of House of Usher and The Telltale Heart, which is a very important part of Poe, is acuteness of the senses. And this is something that Poe himself kind of termed. And this idea is basically that you hear things, see things, feel things that aren't actually there, right? That normal people can't feel. What we would call this is someone who's crazy, right? If I said I can hear voices, you'd be like, oh, Dr. Sizemore's not that sane. But Poe's explanation would be like, no, she's completely sane. She just has acuteness of the senses. She can hear things that normal people can't, because her senses are so sensitive that she can find these. Hold on one second. So the other thing with Poe throughout this story is, you really have to stop and analyze what happens, right? This narrator tells you this old man never did anything to him, that he was nothing but kind to him. and yet it was the veiled eye that he couldn't stand. The eye is a huge symbol in Gothic, and it's important not to forget, because the whole idea of the eye is the ear of somebody looking and watching you. So if you just think merely, if someone was just staring at you, when you catch someone staring at you, that's incredibly creepy. Whenever the whole idea of somebody possibly watching you and you not knowing, it's a huge fear of ours. The other thing is an individual staring in the mirror. When you look in the mirror, you are able to see things about yourself that not everybody can see, right? You know the fears you have, you know the sins you have, you know the secrets you have, you know the goodness. Okay, baby. Everything like that. So the eye is huge in Gothic literature. Even more importantly is the veiled eye that you have here in the Telltale Heart. That's that's an eye on steroids, if you will, because it has even more power because you can't at all see what it's thinking, what it's doing, where it's looking, or anything like that. So in the Gothic, that's even scarier. So we have that one reason is why the narrator dislikes this old man, and he tells us that, right? He's like, he's never done anything to me, but it's the eye. And so he waits on him for several nights. He sits and watches at his door, waiting for the opportune time to kill this man. And what he needs is he needs to see the. Okay, sorry if I cut out there. It showed me that I was having connection issues. Um, so then, once he finally gets them, he goes through and talks about how carefully he concealed this man's body and put it up, right? And once the cops come for just a normal kind of routine, the neighborhood screaming, he could easily, get away with the crime. However, he says that he could hear the old man's heart beating, and it was irritating him so much that he eventually jumps to his feet and confesses his sins. Um, and really, he's not hearing the man's heartbeat, right? Because the man is dead, and we know when a person is dead, their heart does not beat. Let alone, you can't just hear an individual's heartbeat without some kind of assistance, right? And so the idea here is that, again, he has acuteness of the senses, and it's really deep rooted in paranoia. That he is so paranoid that he hears this heartbeat. So lots of interpretation on this story, as far as what does it mean, what happens, the different symbolisms, who's the narrator talking to, charting the mental decline of the narrator. But I think the overall thing I want you to see as a reader is what true American Gothic literature is, and this is it, right? It's not a slasher, it's not a clown hidden in the closet, all those sort of things that we think of when we think of horror. It is really the fear of watching somebody mentally break down and decline, and that is very scary in itself. And so you have a lot of these what we call Gothic tropes or Gothic elements, and I know I put a link in there in your class, but you have the eye, the old house is very important. You have the presence of insanity throughout that kind of helps. You have the supernatural, and this would be the idea that he's able to hear. Um, he can hear the heart. Paranoia as well, right? So you have several of these very common things that are available throughout the Gothic narrative. All right, so the Fall of the House of Usher, very similar to what I just said. I won't spend too much time on it because I want to talk about your essay. But similarly, right, you have the same idea. You have the old house, you have the acuteness of the senses, you have the idea of insanity, supernatural paranoia, but you also have one of the deepest fears at this period in history, which was being buried alive. Okay, and that's one of the things that I think is you don't want to miss the historical significance of this in the 1800s was that people were very afraid of being buried alive. And so one of the things that the Gothic is really good at is preying on our deepest fears, right? And as we know, Madeline, the narrator's sister, is buried alive, and so you have that played throughout and how that fear lives. Um, Also throughout this story, The Fall of the House of Usher, you see again, you have this kind of twisted narrator. We're not sure what to believe of him. We're not sure of his mental stability. What the time kind of shifts, which is a huge element of the Gothic, is that it's hard to follow a clear timeline of how things happen. And so you have the same thing, the old house, the insanity, and so forth. But you also have this odd brother and sister relationship throughout there. And you'll find many literary critics think this symbolizes Poe's own struggles with marrying his cousin, and the kind of society judgment of that and his own kind of concerns with that issue. So hopefully, looking at both these texts as kind of companion text, you see a lot of very similar ideas throughout, and it gives you a really good idea of what the Gothic is all about. All right, so I'll stop. Like I said, I could go on and on, but I'm going to go on to talk about Essay 1. Now, I'll work on trying to make a specific video about this, but I know that many of you might have questions, so I want to talk about it. Try to pull up the instructions here while we're waiting. But so with Essay 1, this is going to be your first attempt at a literary analysis. I have you do this to kind of prepare you for the major research paper, and I specifically picked your topic on Poe so that you wouldn't be wrapped up in what topic that you're going to pick. Because the picking of the topic can be very consuming. So after we finish this first essay and we get past the midterm, then we are going to focus more on your final research paper, which is worth a large part of your overall grade and does have stricter requirements and so forth. But in this research paper, what you want to do in a literary analysis, and I believe, let me just look at your class real quick, in week 7, I've given you the essay instructions, and then how to write a literary analysis overview, what elements of literature is, and then the Al Purdue website. All of these, if you have not written a literary analysis lately, you want to make sure to go through and carefully read, because they'll give you a little bit of foundation to help you move forward with this. But essentially what you want to do is, first, I always tell students, think about what interests you about the author or literature. So, make a little list of what you liked about Poe, questions you might have about Poe, things that you really enjoyed with the literature, questions you might have about the literature, and then begin to formulate an argument from that, right? So maybe you want to talk about Poe's style of using paranoia as a major kind of theme in his in these two literatures, two stories. Or maybe you just want to talk about one of these stories, or maybe you want to talk about a totally different Poe text that you read a long time ago. That's fine. And then you would go through and write examples. So maybe your argument would be Poe uses paranoia as a major theme to drive his stories, and you're going to analyze specifically the Telltale Heart. You would then want to make a list of examples from the text to support you in this argument. The other thing is that you're going to need research. You have to use the LSEO library for research. You cannot use Google. The LSEO library has, their databases are what we call research databases. We know that the material that is published and put on there has been heavily reviewed and written by critics who have enough scholarly background to be able to support their claims. Okay, when you Google something, you can get any Joe Blow off the street writing about the story, which doesn't make their opinion wrong, but they also don't have the credibility as a critic to be able to be requoted to support. So your research that you're going to do is merely to support you. Okay, it is merely meant to help support your idea. So if you say, Poe's story has paranoia in it by using such and such, right? Then, no, my phone's being charged. Then you want to find what a critic that kind of matched that idea and insert one of their quotes to support you as well. You also, in the instructions clarify this, you want to make sure to use the literature to support you. Now, that doesn't mean you need to use a ton of quotes from the literature or even a ton of quotes from your research, right? Research and literature are there to support you. So if my essay is built on Poe building paranoia throughout a story, you as a reader, in order to want to follow this, need to see that, right? You need to see examples of that. So I might find a couple of examples that are really strong to help support that idea. And so I could say, for example, when the narrator says this and this and this, right? This shows paranoia. So you have that. So that's where you need to start right now with your essay. Make sure to review the materials in week 7. You don't have any work in week 7. The whole purpose of that is so that you could really outline and begin writing this essay. Please, please, please don't wait to the very last minute to do this, because you will be more panicked. But kind of play around with your ideas this week. Feel free to email me if you say, like, here's kind of where I'm heading. Can you help me outline my paper or whatnot? I'll be happy to do that. The other thing I want to mention is that I'm happy to edit papers. You have to email it within a reasonable time. I need at least 2 days, and remember, I typically don't work on the weekends because I have my little kids are usually running around. I just have 2 today, but my 12-year-old is usually here, and she's usually the
14 hours.
Yes, you're a 3-year-old.
14 hours now.
Yeah. And but usually, I have all 3, and so it's not a good time for me to get to do editing and so forth. So, but no, I'm happy to do that. Also, don't forget, and I believe I talked to this class about it, about using Upswing, which is our online tutoring. You can submit your paper to Upswing under the Writing Center, and someone will edit your paper and return it.
Too much.
Okay, thank you, Liam. And somebody will return it to you. Their editors are fantastic. It's free. You just do it from your computer, upload the instructions for our assignment, and then they'll get to you. I'll look today whenever I'm done with this to see if I've sent you out a video of that. If I haven't, I'll do a quick video to show you how to use Upswing. I'm the account manager on Upswing for LSEO, and it is, I can't tell you enough how much I love that technology. It's amazing. And as an English teacher, I think the Writing Center is fantastic. So I highly, highly suggest you get your paper edited through Upswing, because it's a great resource, and it's free, costs you nothing, and you don't have to worry. I know a lot of people are fearful to get their writing edited because it feels so judgmental, and it's exposing yourself as a writer. But on Upswing, all those kind of barriers are reduced because you don't have to see anybody or ever talk to anyone. All right. Let's see what time it is. Okay, 5 minutes. Okay, so the midterm test, I will have a review posted for that. What I will tell you is you want to make sure to review your time period notes, and I'll kind of I'll put a review together for you, and I'll try to do that this weekend, to put a review together that's strong enough so that you can, your time period notes are very detailed. So I know that's stressful. Is there a website? Yeah, no problem, Victoria. Yes, it is directly, you can link from the LSEO website, or you can link through Blackboard. At the very bottom left-hand corner of either your home page on Blackboard or your student services, you'll see an orange box that says Upswing, and you can just click on it, and you use your LSEO information to get into it. If you're already in Blackboard, it's going to log you in, and then you can go on and you can find tutors for any subject at any time. So say you want, you're in college algebra and you need math homework and it's 11 p.m. at night. You just type in the subject Math 1314, and it'll show you all the tutors that are online that can tutor you, and you can do it for 10 minutes to an hour. And then there's the Writing Center. You could get either a live tutor, or you can just submit your paper. So I'll do a video for you guys. I couldn't remember if it was this class or my humanities class that I talked to already about it, but I'll make sure. But yeah, Victoria, it's in your Blackboard is the easiest way to get it. It's in a little orange box at the left-hand corner on your home page. Yeah, sure thing. And yeah, just click on it, play around with it. Lamar Orange pays for you to have unlimited access to it, and it's an awesome service. Okay, so I digress. I'm sorry, guys. The midterm test, I'll give you some good notes for it, so you'll have all next week to study and prepare and ask questions. We'll cover the authors of that we had previously covered from weeks 1 through 8, or really weeks 1 through 6. But I will give you a list of specific items that you need to know about the authors from their biographies. And then you'll want to know, of course, the literature. Now, obviously, if you've read the literature, you're fine. Those who just kind of Googled to find out what got the SparkNotes version of the literature will struggle. So make sure that you've read the literature. All you want to do is you don't need to go back and reread it. Okay, baby. But you just need to just do a quick summary refresher so that you understand, you remember who the main characters were, the main idea, the main, the themes, the purpose within that. Typically, your midterm is going to be about 20 to 25 multiple choice questions, and then there might be a couple true or false in there, but the main portion of the grade is usually 4 essay style questions. And like I said, I will give you a strong review so you'll know. I separated it to part 1 and part 2, so you could take part 1 at the beginning of the week and part 2 at the end of the week. Part 1 is always the multiple choice part, and then part 2 is the essay portion, which you'll have considerable amount of time on to write about. Usually with the essay, I give 45 minutes to 60 minutes to complete it. The one thing I'll say is with written essays, I understand how difficult it is to write timed writing. It is incredibly stressful, and add that you're going to do it on Blackboard, it's even more stressful because you're using, the internet and technology, and there's just that added stress. I understand that 100%. So I will give you some strong notes, but I'll tell you what I'm looking for is not great grammar. I don't care about structure. I don't care about, all those typical things an essay needs. What I want to see is a real understanding of the material and a real attempt at trying to answer the question. So a lot of people will try, if they don't know the answer, they'll try to, do these what I call kind of circular answers to a question where they don't really answer it, such as if I said something about, describe the Gothic elements and pose the telltale heart. A student who really doesn't know the answer will say things such as, Pose the Telltale Heart had strong Gothic elements. It was a really good story, really fascinating. The Gothic elements are very important in the story. It's important that students understand the Gothic elements in order to get the story correct, et cetera, right? That didn't answer anything of what the actual Gothic elements are. So when you get to that written part, just know that that's what I'm looking for. Don't get caught up in grammar, correct sentence structure, organization. I understand what timed writing is. I know all too well that to be a good writer, it takes a long time. So don't worry about the editing and mechanics. Worry about the thoughts and ideas and really answering the question and not giving just kind of a surface answer like I just showed you an example. So I'll put a midterm review together for you so that you'll be prepared to that. I'll hope to publish that this weekend. I'll open the week 8 test as soon as I can. Let me see. Pretty sure I have not opened it yet. Okay. So in week 8, you have your midterm and your essay 1 due. Your essay 1 link is already up there. So I'll open the midterm as soon as I can, so that if for those of you who want to take it early, you can do that. Just keep in mind, typically I don't answer my email that quickly on Saturday and Sunday, so just work ahead. You have all week 7 to prepare and to get started for week 8 activities. So essentially, that's almost 2 full weeks. You have all week 7, all week 8 to get essay 1 done and to get the midterm done. So just make sure you use your time wisely. All right, guys, we're at 9:30. I like to be a woman of my word, so I'm going to let y'all go. If you have any questions, feel free to hang around. I will make you a quick little video to show you how to use Upswing. Like I said, I can't tell you enough how much I love that product. And then I'll also get your midterm review together. So thanks so much for joining me on a Saturday morning and bearing with my wild 3-year-old who's sitting here putting Legos in my hand. If you have any questions, stick around. Okay, thanks, Liam. Say goodbye. Say bye, guys. Say bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
All right, you'll have a good day.
Have a good day, guys.
My students are on there. Yeah.
Why?